All right. Good evening again, everybody. Let's go ahead and get this party on the road. Please turn in your Bibles to Mark chapter 14. Let me do the same. So what we're going to do tonight, friends, is we'll cover the rest of Mark 14. I had originally thought we would get through the end of Mark 15 tonight. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. There's no need to rush. Okay, so we'll cover most of chapter 15. I'll flip there myself. Give y'all just a second to get there. Mark 14. Here we go. All right, we are in week 9 of our 10-week study. We're taking next week off, and we will close up the study on March the 23rd. Okay. So Mark 14. Go ahead and find verse 12 in Mark 14, and we'll get through. Fingers crossed. We'll get through chapter 15, verse 47. As always, please put those questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring that. Pull up menti.com in a separate web browser or on your phone or what have you. We'll do one Menti poll tonight. What you're going to see here on this slide is just a big chart, and I'm not going to go through all of it. I really just wanted to include this for you to keep and reflect on and go back to later on. Okay, but I will say here, I put here in the left-hand column the progression of the gospel according to Mark. One of my arguments in this series is that Mark is a 3-act play, and I put the chapter and verse that breaks up these scenes, and then the main point Mark wants us to see in each of these scenes. Okay, and so we are here at Act 3, Scene 2, the very end, the Passion story. Jesus has died and risen. What are you going to do about it? Okay, so no need to go through all that, but for future Bible study, or if you ever have any questions about Mark, please go back to that. And yes, I will email you that chart. When I email out the PowerPoint slides, it'll be right there. Okay, you can have it to keep. Mark 14, verses 12 through 16. Just to set the context here, Jesus has not been betrayed yet. Judas has already gone to the chief priests to collect payment for betraying Jesus. They know they want to kill him, and we call her Mary. Mark doesn't name her Mary. Mary of Bethany has anointed his head and feet. Okay, verse 12. On the first day of unleavened bread, when the Passover lamb is sacrificed, his disciples said to him, "Where do you want us to go and make the preparations for you to eat the Passover?" So he sent 2 of his disciples, saying to them, "Go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him, and wherever he enters, say to the owner of the house, 'The teacher asks, where is my guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' He will show you a large room upstairs, furnished and ready. Make preparations for us there." So the disciples set out and went to the city and found everything as he had told them, and they prepared the Passover meal. Remember when Jesus rode into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey, everything was happening according to prophecy, right? There's a reason he entered Jerusalem from the east, from the Mount of Olives. That's because the prophet Zechariah in the Old Testament said the Messiah is going to come from the Mount of Olives. Okay, all this is to fulfill what has already been prophesied. Here, you get the similar thing, that it's not that it's not that anybody had ever prophesied that there'd be somebody waiting with the guest room in Jerusalem, but it's that all this was happening exactly as it was supposed to. This has all been prearranged, either by Jesus himself or by God. Okay, everything is happening exactly as it should. The disciples aren't going to get it, but they don't have to. Jesus gets it. So it's time for Passover, folks. So remember, Jesus would spend the night in the suburb of Bethany, and he would ride or walk into Jerusalem during the week of Passover. Well, I say the week. Passover is really the name of a meal. Maybe you've had the privilege in your life to eat Passover. That was a really neat moment in my college experience, in my campus ministry, when we invited some of our friends from the Jewish campus ministry to come and have Passover with us, or actually lead us in Passover. So Passover is the name of a meal. The Feast of Unleavened Bread is the name, well, of a feast, is the name of a festival lasting for the entire week. Okay, so the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which lasts for 7 days, begins with Passover. All right, and then it will end in 7 days after Passover. As a Old Testament review, Passover is all about the Exodus. You rehearse at the Passover meal what happened in the Exodus. You were supposed to leave, you were supposed to empty out your house of all leaven, a fancy word for yeast. Remember in the Exodus story, God tells the Israelites, listen, you got to go, folks. This is your one shot to get away from Pharaoh. You're in a hurry. Don't wait for your bread to rise. That's where it comes from. You're in a haste to leave Egypt. And also the leavening or the yeast is supposed to symbolize Egypt itself. You're supposed to leave that leaven, leave that old life behind you as you're being liberated. Now, Passover is all about the meal, and the liturgy for that meal evolved over the centuries. In Second Temple Judaism, which is what Jesus knew, Judaism with a second temple, the centerpiece of the meal was the lamb. That's not the case in Passover. In most Passover meals today, there's usually several courses, 4 glasses of wine, there's bitter herbs and bread. Usually, there's not the centerpiece is not the lamb. For Jesus, the centerpiece would have been the lamb, because in the Exodus story, the blood of the lamb was supposed to be smeared on the doors of the Israelites. You probably remember this. And death itself, or the angel of the Lord that brought death, would see the blood of the lamb and pass over the homes of the Israelites. Okay. There's a reason I'm going through all this Passover and Exodus stuff, I promise. So when Jesus enters Jerusalem, what you need to know is that families from all over what is now Israel would have come into Jerusalem. It's a pilgrimage festival. They would have made the pilgrimage to Jerusalem. And they would have either brought a lamb with them or purchased a lamb in the city that week for the week of unleavened bread. And that lamb was offered as a sacrifice. It was slaughtered in the afternoon before Passover. That's called the day of preparation. Okay, so back to our scripture. Here in verse 12, on the first day of unleavened bread, when the Passover lamb is sacrificed. Okay, that's what they're talking about. Every family would have to bring a lamb into the temple for it to be sacrificed. The lamb would then be carried home, and you had to consume the entire lamb, okay, with your family. It all had to be eaten, everything, before you went to bed that night, okay? That's the Passover meal. The lamb was supposed to seal this covenant, and a covenant is a promise between God and the people. The promise is God will save this people, and also the people will worship God. Also, Exodus is the birth of a new nation. We really sometimes we forget that in the Exodus story. Like, it's so important for the nation of Israel because this is their origin story. This is where they come from. God saved them from slavery, made a way from them when there was no way. Once they were no people, Passover happened, Exodus happened. Now they are a people. All that is important for us here coming to the Last Supper. So I want to summarize here a few points for what this means for Jesus. So what Jesus is going to do is he's going to preside at the Last Supper here in a few moments. And he's going to reinterpret Passover. He's going to reinterpret it. Passover had been celebrated as a holy meal for generations by Jesus's time. Well, Jesus is going to offer a brand new interpretation. He is the new Exodus. Okay, he is the new Exodus. He is freedom from slavery. God is forming a new nation. We might not call it nation. Here I just capitalized people. We think nation and we think laws and borders. It's not what the New Testament's thinking about. It's a people, a people. God's forming a new people in Jesus. God is delivering God's new people from sin and death. This deliverance happens through the sacrifice of Jesus. Okay, that's actually how it is achieved. And this new people is the body of Jesus, represented by this bread. And they are saved, they are redeemed by his blood. That's going to be represented in this wine. Go forward a little bit here. Okay. I wanted before we go ahead into the rest of this, I wanted to walk you through just the rest of the events of Holy Week, because it's different from John. And I find this interesting. I hope you find this interesting too. And it's going to help us understand what Mark is trying to do. So come with me to Thursday. So we are here on Thursday afternoon of Holy Week. All right. Passover will begin at sundown on Thursday, okay, because that's when Friday begins. Remember, in the Jewish calendar, the day begins at sundown. The day ends at sundown, the next day begins, all right? The lamb would be sacrificed in the afternoon of Thursday. Passover meal would happen that night, which would be on Thursday night, would actually be Friday, okay? And Jesus will then is then going to be betrayed, arrested, and tried in just a few moments. We're going to get to that. This is where we get Maundy Thursday. All right. In a few weeks, we're going to have Maundy Thursday at church. Mark's account of things really is where we get Maundy Thursday. Matthew and Luke will borrow from Mark, and they just pretty much copy Mark's sequence of events. I want you to know that Mark wanted the Last Supper to be a Passover meal. Why is that important? Because if we were studying the gospel according to John, this would be different. In John, it's not Passover yet. John remembers Passover happening the next day. It's interesting. For Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Passover begins here on Thursday night. For John, Passover begins on Friday night. It's like they just disagree on the timing. And there's a theological reason for this. It's because if Passover is happening here on Thursday night, that means Jesus presiding at Passover now gets to be reinterpreted as the Last Supper, as communion. Mark just really wants the Last Supper to be a Passover meal. In the morning, after we're going to get to this tonight, Jesus will appear before Pilate on Friday morning. He is crucified at 9 o'clock. He will die at noon, high noon. John remembers it differently. Passover will begin at sundown on Friday, not Thursday night, but on Friday night. He appears to Pilate actually at 12 p.m. on Friday. Passover hasn't happened yet. He's crucified and he dies on Friday, when the Passover lamb, when all those lambs I told you about are coming into the temple to be sacrificed. And this is where we get Good Friday. We get our theology of Good Friday from John, and we get our theology for Maundy Thursday from Mark. Why? Because if it's not Passover yet in John, that means those lambs are being sacrificed to the temple for Passover that night. And Jesus is crucified in John when the Passover lambs are being slaughtered in the temple. The theology is Jesus is the lamb. He is the lamb. So that when the disciples take Passover that night, Friday night in John, they don't have a lamb. They come to the table, there is no lamb, because Jesus is the lamb. He's gone. Okay, Saturday, for Saturday, it's in Mark, it's a normal Sabbath day. For John, it's a Sabbath day and it's Passover. And then Sunday, it's the same chronology. Okay, verses 17 through 21. When it was evening, he came with the 12. And when they had taken their places and were eating, Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me." They began to be distressed and to say to him one after another, "Surely not I." He said to them, "It is one of the 12, one who is dipping bread into the bowl with me. For the Son of Man goes as it is written of him. But woe to that one by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that one not to have been born." So they go to a guest room. Jesus presides at the Passover meal in a guest room. I forgot to say, you would, here it is. You would only eat Passover with your family. You only eat Passover with your family, okay? You would actually come to Jerusalem, make the pilgrimage festival with your family. Well, Jesus doesn't come with his biological family, but he comes with his family, his kinship family, the disciples, okay? That's who he's having the meal with. And Jesus takes the role of head of the family and would lead them through the Passover liturgy. Because Jerusalem would have just been packed, right? The population of Jerusalem, just imagine the population of Houston just going exponential overnight. That's what would have happened in Jerusalem. And if you had a guest bedroom in your house and you're living in Westview or wherever, you get to charge. I mean, there's an economy built on this. It's close to a tourism industry. I wouldn't call it tourism because this is a sacred pilgrimage after all. But the locals, if they had a spare room, they got to rent it out for the Feast of Unleavened Bread, make some money off of this. That's okay. People were willing to pay, only happy to pay. And that's what would have happened. The disciples would have paid good money to rent out the guest room. Note the references to eating here in this. Let's see, the one who is eating with me, they were all eating. The one who dips his hand into the bowl, that's an eating thing. Again, you didn't just eat Passover with your family, but you are only supposed to eat in this culture with people you love, people whom you considered family. Why is that important? Because Mark wants us to see that the person who's going to betray Jesus, it's not just anybody. This person's eating with Jesus. This is family. This is someone at your dinner table. This is somebody who has an intimate knowledge of you. Betrayal is family business. If you've ever been betrayed, you probably have. It's probably by somebody you knew well. If you've ever been the betrayer, it's probably you did it to somebody you knew well, somebody who was family. So I want to go to our Menti poll for tonight, just to piggyback on this idea of betrayal. Go to menti.com. Here we go. And go to and enter this code, please, 3707 7672. 3707 7672. Just real simple. It's going to ask you for 3 words that describe what it's like to be betrayed. Give it to me. I wanted to lead us through this exercise tonight so we can feel the feelings of Maundy Thursday. It's sometimes we read this story. Sometimes we read this story and we're detached from the feelings of it all. It's just a sequence of events. Well, this is some real human stuff going on. And I'll just take a moment and let this come in. As a reminder of how Menti works, the larger the font, the more popular the answer. So anger, painful, angry, more popular. We'll give it just another few seconds. Okay. So what's it like to be betrayed? Of course, it's painful. And anger. Shocking, devastating, sadness, humiliating, abandonment, different permutations of disappointment. Devastated. Ooh. So these are the emotions of Maundy Thursday. I wanted y'all to see this because it's not like Jesus didn't feel any of this. Jesus would have been just as angry. I mean, of course, he's Lord of Lords. He knows this has to happen. Doesn't mean he's not disappointed. He is disappointed. He is hurting. He is angry. He is heartbroken. Okay, thank you for that. Verses 22 through 25. While they were eating, he took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, gave it to them, and said, "Take, this is my body." Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, and all of them drank from it. He said to them, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. Truly, I tell you, I will never again drink of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God." So this is the Lord's Supper. And as we said earlier, it's a reinterpretation, a fresh take on the Passover meal. Here, the focus isn't the lamb. Okay, it would have, if this were a traditional Passover meal, the focus of the centerpiece of the table would be the lamb. Here, the focus is Jesus. He is the centerpiece. He is the host, and he is centerpiece. Okay, and what this meal does is it constitutes a new people, capital P people, forms a new family, which is exactly what happened in the Exodus story. Exodus defines, it constitutes who Israel is. They are defined by this story of liberation. Well, this meal defines us, okay? It constitutes a family with Jesus as the host and Jesus as the centerpiece. Now, you'll note that Jesus uses the same fourfold formula. Say that 10 times fast. That he used in the feeding of the 5,000 and the 4,000. Mark had two feeding stories. Jesus took the loaves and fishes, blessed them, broke them, gave. Okay, and we said in those stories, Jesus was forming the kingdom movement, right? Where he was the centerpiece and he was the lead. He was bringing together a new people, and this is in the feeding stories, and here at the Passover meal, we are supposed to think communion, Lord's Supper. Mark doesn't let us have any doubts. He says here in verse 23, then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, the Greek there is Eucharisto. Eucharist literally means giving thanks. Mark kind of goes out of his way to say that all of them drank from it. He doesn't have to say that. He could have put a period there. Didn't do that. All of them drank from it. Why is that important? Because we're supposed to imagine. Remember, we're supposed to read Mark from back to front. We know how this ends. We're supposed to imagine Judas and Peter drinking from it. Judas and Peter drink from this. If they all drink, we know Judas drank too, especially Judas. So the emphasis here is on this new covenant that God is making. God is saving this new people, forming this new people. And sometimes we forget that the Last Supper looks ahead. Jesus says, "I'm not going to drink wine again until I drink it again in the kingdom of God." It's not an if, it's a when. When Jesus comes back. Whenever we gather at communion, friends, whether you take communion many times or never have, communion looks ahead to what we call the consummation, the completion of creation, when Jesus comes back and finishes what he started. Okay, verses 26 through 31. When they had sung the hymn, there would have been actually several hymns in the Passover meal, and Jesus would have led them, being the head of the family. When they had sung the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives, and Jesus said to them, "You will all become deserters, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee. Peter said to him, even though all become deserters, I will not. Jesus said to him, truly I tell you, this day, this very night, before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. But he said vehemently, even though I must die with you, I will not deny you. And all of them said the same. Jesus is going back to the Mount of Olives, directly to the east of Jerusalem. Jerusalem sits on the top of Mount Zion. Right next to it to the east is the Mount of Olives. Jesus quotes pretty much word for word this prophecy out of Zechariah chapter 13, verse 7. Strike the shepherd that the sheep may be scattered. Jesus is the shepherd, okay? And by striking him, the sheep will scatter. The disciples will run. They will run for the hills. They don't think they will, they will. Jesus just goes ahead and reminds them again of resurrection. I actually had forgotten that Jesus says this. I was preparing for the study and I forgot that he tells them in this precise moment, right before things are about to get hairy, he's reminding them, hey, this isn't the end. You're going to think this is the end. This isn't the end. He tells them where the rendezvous point is going to be. Remember, once Jesus is arrested, the disciples never see him again. That's it. That's it. They see him from afar. They see crucifixion from afar, but they don't see, like, they're not with him again, at least until Easter. And so how will they know where to find Jesus, right? Well, Jesus tells them, Galilee, meet me there, guys. And there's some beautiful poetry there. Here in Mark, Galilee is where the kingdom movement began. And that's where it's going to continue. It's where it's going to start again. They're going to go back to where they began. All right. The word all is used 3 times here. That's important because we're supposed to see that everybody's going to bail on Jesus. All of them, all of us, all will desert Jesus, just like all took the cup of the Lord's Supper and all were forgiven. Well, all were forgiven because they're going to need it. Why be forgiven if you're not going to need it? They're going to need it. Denial means to push away. I made a big deal out of this when I preached Peter a few weeks ago. The word denial in Greek literally means to push away, to distance yourself from somebody. Okay, it's kind of like social distancing, to tell you the truth. You just push somebody away from you. It's the exact same word Jesus uses when he says, well, if anybody wants to become my followers, you must deny yourself, take up your cross, follow me. We are to push away our old self. We are to push away the old creation part of ourselves, the bitter selves, the selfish selves. We're to put as much social distance between our new selves and our old selves as possible. But don't push away Jesus. Don't push away him. Verses 32 through 42. They went to a place called Gethsemane. I'm partial to the name. And he said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. He took with him Peter and James and John and began to be distressed and agitated. And he said to them, I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and keep awake. And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed that, if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. He said, Abba, Father, for you all things are possible. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I want, but what you want. He came and found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, Simon, are you asleep? Could you not keep awake 1 hour? Keep awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. And again he went away and prayed, saying the same words. And once more he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to say to him. He came a 3rd time and said to them, are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Enough. The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up. Let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. Gethsemane. The Hebrew is Gethsemane. It literally means olive press. Olive press. It's where they made extra virgin olive oil. Okay. It's at the foot of the Mount of Olives. It's called the Mount of Olives for a reason. It's because it was an olive garden, okay? Not like the breadsticks Olive Garden, but an actual olive garden, all right? And so you would use gravity, you would take olives from the top of the hill, roll them down to this garden at the foot of the Mount of Olives and press the olives and make olive oil. I guess there was a nice little quaint, quiet garden there at Gethsemane where people could pray, meditate, be alone. Jesus probably really liked that spot because it was a quiet, nice, quiet spot. Now, why is he grieving? It's an interesting word to use. Why grieving? Actually, go ahead and I've got two things I want you to put in the chat. One that I've written here. We'll get to this one in the second question in a second. But here, the chat. Go ahead and put in the chat. Why do you think he's grieving? I put a few things here. He knows he's about to be executed. He's grieving that. He knows he's going to have to go through this alone. He's grieving that. He knows the disciples are going to bail on him. They will not. He says, remain here with me while I pray. They are not going to remain here with him. But this list here is not exhaustive. Why do you think he's grieving? You put that in the chat. And while you do, I'll keep going. So he goes to pray in the Garden of Gethsemane, just to have some time kind of to prepare himself for what's going to come. And what do the disciples do? They fall asleep on him. All right. Well, this is Mark 14. Back in Mark 13, what did he tell them? He said, keep awake. He gave them two commands: beware and keep awake. Beware people who are going to prophesy the end. They don't know what they're talking about. And keep awake. Keep awake. Don't fall asleep on Jesus. They fall asleep on Jesus. Check in the chat. He's grieving, leaving his comrades, students. He's going to miss his dear family and friends. Yes. He wants more time to teach his followers. Ooh, that's really good. This is all really good. I hadn't thought about that one. He knows the pain and agony and loss. He's human. He would wonder if he had done enough before he had to leave. He's not sure they have what it takes to carry on. I think you're absolutely right about that. Also in the chat, I want you to answer this question. He loves them. He's going to miss their time together. How do we fall asleep on Jesus today? So we're not all going to be Peter, James, and John. We're just going to fall asleep at 2 a.m. while Jesus is praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. But still, we fall asleep on him. How do we fall asleep on Jesus today? So distractions of life. Thank you, Linda. We don't forgive. Compound sadness on multiple levels. We get way too comfortable. We stop listening to it. Yes, we get busy. Interesting. We fall asleep by getting busy. Fascinating how humans work, isn't it? We fall asleep on Jesus by getting busy. I like the paradox there. We worship, but we don't act or serve. Yes. We become Sunday only disciples. We snooze Monday through Saturday. We think we can handle it all without involving Jesus in our lives. If I don't get to all these friends, I'm sorry. Y'all are just got great responses. It's harder to wait, easier to do. Yes. We do things for the wrong reasons. That's one of the things I've been working on in Lent. I do a lot of right things. I do them for the right reasons? Okay, very good, friends. Verses 43 through 52. Immediately, while things are happening now, Mark likes to throw in the word immediately when things are starting to really happen. Immediately, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. And with him there was a crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard. So when he came, he went up to him at once and said, Rabbi, and kissed him. Then they laid hands on him and arrested him. But one of those who stood near drew his sword and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said to them, have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me, as though I were a bandit? Day after day I was with you in the temple teaching, and you did not arrest me. Excuse me. But let the scriptures be fulfilled. All of them deserted him and fled. A certain young man was following him, wearing nothing but a linen cloth. They caught hold of him, but he left the linen cloth and ran off naked. I just go ahead and tell you right now, I have no idea what to do with that. New Testament scholars to this day don't know what to do with it. Some say that the naked guy is Mark, that he's supposed to be, he's Mark, and that's how Mark has a firsthand knowledge of all of this. Kind of a stretch, honestly. But what's not a stretch is Mark may know this person, right? So Mark writes this gospel. Where does he get all this information? From firsthand accounts of Jesus. And it's likely the case that Mark knows this person. He's not going to give us his name, but he probably knows who it is, somebody who told Mark the Passion story. Okay, I want you to see this kind of formula here. Chief priests, scribes, and elders. That's going to keep coming up. Chief priests, scribes, and elders. Lots of people have a hand in killing Jesus, but the leadership of Israel, they really push it. Of course, the chief priests would be the clergy, and kind of the scribes, and elders would be the leaders of the people, of the laity. All people, as in like everybody, misunderstands Jesus and Mark. That's been a constant theme in this gospel. Nobody gets Jesus. Nobody understands that the King of Kings is supposed to be a servant. It doesn't click with people that he's come to die, right? All people don't get him, and they will all desert him. So Judas comes to betray Jesus. He leads this in John. If we were in John, it would be an entire cohort of military, probably about 600 soldiers. This isn't soldiers, it's a mob, okay? Swords and clubs, it's a mob of people. And they come for him, and Jesus uses the word bandit. The word there was reserved for insurrectionists, people who would lead open rebellion against the Roman Empire. The Romans would call them terrorists. We might call them terrorists, actually. You could actually replace the word bandit here for terrorist and kind of get the same meaning. And so Jesus is asking these folks, are y'all coming after me like I'm a terrorist here? Is that really what you think I am? And that's really what they think he is. Judas betrays him. He does the deed. Why did Judas do it? I said last week I tried to be humanizing of Judas, and I want to do so again. The way in my head, when I try to answer the question, why did Judas do it? I go, okay, what motivates Judas? Well, it's either got to be because he hates Jesus. It's got to be cruelty, or because he has no other path to go. He's desperate. And I think we can rule out cruelty. I don't think he wants to kill Jesus. He's had plenty of opportunities to be cruel to Jesus in the past. He doesn't do it. I think the man's desperate. He's more likely desperate. I got into a really good email conversation with one of our classmates this week about why Judas would be so desperate. One good reason is that it's caused, Judas is actually desperate because Judas really wants to see Jesus be that kind of bandit that takes the city by force, right? And so by leading this mob to Jesus, it's a way of forcing Jesus's hand, right? Judas is tired of Jesus waiting around. It's time, Jesus, let's go. Let's take the city. Judas wanted to see those swords being drawn. So maybe Judas was so desperate for things to change in Jerusalem. He makes Jesus take a stand. Come on, let's go. Another way of looking at Judas being desperate is that he just sees this entire cause as lost. He wanted Jesus to take the city from the Romans. He doesn't see it happening. The cause is lost. It's not going to happen. And so he wants to go home. I kind of side on that one. Either way, and what I find, what I really want to drill home is Judas is forgiven. We get this, remember, the all language is important. All drank from the cup of the Lord's Supper. All deserted him. All fled. And they will all be forgiven. And Judas is included in the all. Okay. For me, why Judas does it is less important. It's not as important as what happens to Judas. The man's forgiven. Let me check the chat here. Someone sent me a private message. Let me read it. All people didn't get it, yet the demons did recognize the Son of God. Why? I said earlier in our study that the demons do get Jesus. Interesting, we don't see demons again in the Passion story. It's like Mark has just kind of dropped that part of the narrative. Excuse me. I think the demons have been waiting for the Son of God to come. They knew this day would come. They knew their enemy would come one day. And they'd been on the lookout for him, right? Mark just assumes a hidden world of spiritual things with demons and angels, and they're constantly doing stuff, right? The demons were on the lookout for him. But the rest of us, we mere mortals, we weren't looking out for him. We don't understand him. Great conversation in the chat here. Judas was sorry about the way things turned out, but he was not so sure he was forgiven. I totally agree. In fact, Matt, if we were in Matthew takes it to Matthew remembers things turning out differently, where Judas actually takes his own life. So to Jesus, Judas is forgiven, but Judas doesn't feel that yet. Was Judas trying to save himself, thinking that all who support Jesus are in danger, except for someone who turns him in? I think that's a very good explanation. That's another good explanation. That would be Judas being desperate. He sees the writing on the wall. He's got to get out of town. We are all Judas in different seasons of our lives. Absolutely. Judas is forgiven for betrayal, but is he forgiven for committing suicide? Hard question. I'll answer that as a pastor. The answer is yes. All means all. All are forgiven. Clarification, not for a season. I mean, we have been Judas. Yes, we are all Judas. Good conversation, good questions. All right, let's continue. Verse 53. They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes were assembled. Peter had followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest, and he was sitting with the guards, warming himself at the fire. I love how Mark writes. He just tees up the Peter story and then backs off. Okay. Verse 55. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. For many gave false testimony against him, and their testimony did not agree. Some stood up and gave false testimony against him, saying, "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another, not made with hands.' But even on this point, their testimony did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, 'Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?' But he was silent and did not answer. Again, the high priest asked him, 'Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?' Jesus said, 'I am. I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power and coming with the clouds of heaven.' Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, 'Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your decision?' All of them condemned him as deserving death. Some began to spit on him, to blindfold him, to strike him, saying to him, 'Prophesy.' The guards also took him over and beat him. So you got to remember, it's the middle of the night. Like it's definitely after midnight. And we come to Caiaphas. Caiaphas is the high priest in Jerusalem at this time. And it's no accident that he has assembled the entire Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin is the high court of Jewish elders, 70 some odd people. It's no accident that they just happen to be at Caiaphas' house at 2 a.m. Right? This is a setup job. All right. And the question is sorry for the typo. The question isn't, is Jesus guilty? That would be real justice. That would be a real trial. The question is, what did Jesus do to be guilty? They assume the man's guilty. So what did he do? Surely there's something they can pin on this guy. Okay. Are you the Messiah, the blessed one of God? It's a kind of confession. So here we see the fourth correct confession in Mark. The first one came from the demons. You are God's son, the Messiah. The second came from Peter. You are the Messiah. The third came from God in the transfiguration story. This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him. Those are correct confessions of faith in Christ. The fourth one, ironically, comes from Caiaphas himself. Okay. None of the humans are going to really understand what this means for Jesus to be king. Only the demons and God are really going to understand. Okay, because they've been the demons and God, according to Mark, at least from Mark's perspective, have been fighting it out for all eternity. Peter's confession and Caiaphas' confession are super ironic, right? Because as Peter's supposed to be the rock and Caiaphas as the high priest, if anyone's going to get Jesus, it should be them. Peter's supposed to be the leader, right? The chief disciple. Caiaphas, the high priest, he's in charge of the temple. He should know the Messiah when he sees one. He should. If anybody's going to know, these two should. They don't get it. Okay. So what Caiaphas does is it's kind of smart. It's kind of clever, to be honest. He gets a confession out of Jesus. So imagine you're arrested and you've done nothing wrong, but you're led in cuffs, and it's a typical law and order scene where they're drilling you, and they get a confession out of you. They think it's a false confession, but they don't care. They got a confession out of you. All that matters is they have it on public record that you confessed to something. So that's Caiaphas's play. He wants to get Jesus on public record saying that he is the Messiah. Caiaphas doesn't buy it. He doesn't think he's the Messiah, but he'll have it on public record that Jesus thinks he's the Messiah. And so in this crazy twist, Jesus himself utters a correct confession about himself, making him the fifth correct confession of Jesus in Mark. Jesus says, I am. Who are you? I am. That is just a clear finger pointing back to the Exodus story. When God appears to Moses in a burning bush and says, I am what I am, or Yahweh, I will be what I will be, the name of God, I am. Now Jesus is guilty of blasphemy. He's done it. Blasphemy is capital offense for Jews in this time. It is deliberately insulting God. Verses 66 through 72. While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she stared at him and said, You also were with Jesus, the man from Nazareth. But he denied it, saying, I do not know or understand what you were talking about. And he went out into the forecourt. Then the cock crowed. And the servant girl, on seeing him, began to say to the bystanders, This man is one of them. But again he denied it. Then after a little while, the bystanders again said to Peter, Certainly you are one of them, for you are a Galilean. But he began to curse, and he swore an oath, I do not know this man you are talking about. At that moment, the cock crowed for the second time. Then Peter remembered that Jesus had said to him, Before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. And he broke down and wept. I want you to see that who's really on trial is Peter. There are 2 trials kind of going on, Jesus and Peter. But Actually, for me, the most gut-wrenching one is Peter. Peter's being judged. He's being tested. The high priest's palace, Caiaphas's palace, it was built on the side of Mount Zion. It was actually at an angle, and the courtyard of his palace actually looked up. It was on a hill, so you looked up to its inner chamber, and so you can make eye contact with somebody from the courtyard to the inner chamber. And so Luke actually uses this where Jesus just looks at Peter after the Nile, just looks at him. Okay. So how do they know that Peter is a Galilean? Peter would have dressed differently, and he would have had an accent. Kind of like when I go back to North Carolina, my accent suddenly changes. Okay. He would have had an accent, and he would have dressed differently from these urban Jerusalem people. Okay. And he would have stood out. He really would have stood out. Okay. Kind of like a Texan dressing typical Texan going off to New York. It's stick out. But isn't that the point, right? We're supposed to stand out from the world. We're supposed to stand out. We're supposed to be different from the world because we're supposed to be followers of Jesus. So what that means is Peter doesn't just deny Jesus. Oh, he does more than that. He denies who he is. Peter lies because of course Peter knows him. Of course, this is who Peter is. He denies who he is. I mean, when we deny Jesus, we're also denying ourselves. We're denying who we are. We tell the world, no, I'm not with Jesus. And so we push him out. We also push ourselves out. So we have both Jesus and Peter on public record now. Jesus said, I am God, essentially. Well, Peter's on public record. I don't know. We're going to pick up our pace because Mark does here. Chapter 15, 1-5. As soon as it was morning, it's Friday morning of Holy Week, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and the scribes and the whole council. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Pilate asked him, are you the king of the Jews? He answered him, you say so. Then the chief priests accused him of many things. Pilate asked him again, have you no answer? See how many charges they bring against you. But Jesus made no further reply, so that Pilate was amazed. So this whole council here refers to the Sanhedrin. They can't kill Jesus. Jesus is guilty of blasphemy, and it's a capital offense for the Jews. But remember, now Judea, where Jerusalem is a Roman colony, and Roman law rules. Only the Romans can execute somebody. Pilate doesn't care about blasphemy. He's not a Jew. He doesn't care about blasphemy, and he's not going to carry out a sentence against blasphemy. He doesn't care. He does care about insurrection. That's what he cares about. Pontius Pilate, this is shameless plug for this coming Sunday. In our sermon series, we're going to be talking about Pilate. He was procurator of Judea for 10 years. Procurator means he inhabited, it's kind of interesting, he was in middle management, okay? Kind of like the regional director of this part of this corner of the Roman Empire. And he had been appointed by the emperor to keep the peace and keep everyone under Roman control. Now, technically, as the Roman ruler in Jerusalem, he's the king of the Jews. It's kind of an awkward moment. You got two kings of the Jews here, and Jerusalem is not big enough for the pair of them. Okay? What ironically, Pilate makes the sixth correct confession of faith in Mark when he asks Jesus, are you the king? Are you the king of the Jews? It's a kind of confession of faith, kind of like what Caiaphas does when Caiaphas asks him, are you the Messiah? Okay. Like I said, Pilate doesn't care about blasphemy at all. He cares about insurrection. He cares about the Jewish peasants leading a revolt against the big bad empire. All right. And if Jesus is claiming to be a king, well, he's got to be leading a rebellion. Okay. That's what he cares about. Verses 6-15. Now at the festival, he used to release a prisoner for them, anyone whom they wanted. Now a man called Barabbas was in prison with the rebels who had committed murder during the Insurrection. This has happened before. So the crowd came and began to ask Pilate to do for them according to his custom. Then he answered them, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that the chief priests had handed him over. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release Barabbas for them instead. Pilate spoke to them again. "Then what do you wish me to do with the man you call the king of the Jews?" They shouted back, "Crucify him." Pilate asked them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them. And after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. I didn't unpack here what crucifixion is, just so everyone understands. I mean, crucifixion is lynching. Really, it's what it is. It's an act of terrorism. It's a means of putting people in their place, and it's extremely violent and it's very painful. We have no idea who Barabbas is. Don't know. It doesn't show up in any historical record. Okay. And we have no knowledge of Pilate actually ever doing this in the Passover, exchanging prisoners. But we do know that Barabbas is supposed to be symbolic. He's us. He is us. Barabbas is all of us who get let off the hook. Sometimes we think Pilate doesn't want Jesus to be crucified in our readings of the Passion story, like he's kind of lost control of the situation here. That's not true. I mean, Pilate is really conducting a theater here. He wants the crowd to call for the crucifixion here because he doesn't want the blood of Jesus on his hands. That way he can tell them later on, if this goes south, he can say, "Hey, this is what you guys wanted. I just did exactly what you wanted." And so who ends up killing Jesus? Well, it's interesting. It's nobody and it's everybody. It's nobody in that nobody ever really takes ownership of Jesus. Nobody wants to claim him. Jesus really dies alone, friendless. Everyone kind of shuffles Jesus around because they don't want to deal with him. But that means everybody's responsible for killing Jesus, because if he's nobody's problem, he's everybody's problem. Nobody wants to be responsible for him. Nobody saves him, which means everybody kills him. Everybody has a hand in killing Jesus. Verses 16 through 20. Then the soldiers led him into the courtyard of the palace, that is the governor's headquarters. And they called together the whole cohort. And they clothed him in a purple cloak, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on him, and they began saluting him, "Hail, King of the Jews." They struck his head with the reeds, spat upon him, and knelt down in homage to him. After mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on him. They led him out to crucify him. So the soldiers take him to Pilate's fortress, his own palace in Jerusalem, and it was armed to the teeth, mind you. The entire Roman cohort would have been stationed there, at least over a cohort would be about 600 soldiers, okay? Everything of what I just read to you points to Jesus being king, but not the kind of king that anybody was expecting. This is why nobody understands him. He's a suffering king. So he's in the king's house. He's in Pilate's house right now, but he can never possess this house. He's in his own home, but he can never have it. Jesus has a kind of military force behind him. He has the cohort right here, but they beat him. They beat him to a pulp. Jesus wears a purple cloak. Purple is the sign of royalty, but here it's an insult. He wears a crown of thorns, but it's no comfort to him. It hurts him. He has worshipers. All these people kneel down in front of him, but they don't worship out of right desire. They worship to insult him. And here we see the seventh correct confession of faith. I say in Hebrews, in Mark, "Hail, King of the Jews." That's who he is, King of the Jews. But he's a suffering king. This is meant to offend him. It's supposed to be sarcasm. The last passage for tonight. They compelled the passerby who was coming in from the country to carry his cross. It was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. Then they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him and divided his clothes among them, casting lots to decide what each should take. It was 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him. The inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And with him they crucified two bandits, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "Aha, you who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests, along with the scribes, who were also mocking him among themselves and saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now, so that we may see and believe." Those who were crucified with him also taunted him. Crucifixion is lynching. It's a form of public torture to keep powerless people in place. We don't know who this Simon of Cyrene is, kind of like that naked guy. We don't know who he is, but similar to him, probably Mark knows his family because he mentions his sons. They might even be in his own congregation, in Mark's congregation. It's possible. I want you to see that just like in the preceding passage, it was all about Jesus being king, but a suffering king. Now the suffering king has a throne. He has been enthroned. It's the cross. And there he dies. Nobody understands him. They do not understand resurrection, even though he told them about it. Resurrection is about himself coming back in 3 days. They thought he was talking about the temple. He was talking about his body. They do not understand what salvation is. They say, "Save yourself, save yourself." If they really understood, they would know that there can be no salvation without him dying. He's a king, and he's on display to the entire world on his throne, and he's the exact opposite of what a king should be. He's a sacrifice, and he's suffering. The people down there, they want Jesus to save himself, and then they will see and believe. And I'll leave you with this. If Mark has taught us anything, it's that we must do the opposite. They say, "We'll see and believe." Well, we must do the opposite. They have it backwards. We must believe, and then we will see. That's where I leave you. I will see you in 2 Tuesdays. We'll wrap up our session, our class on Mark. Sorry for going over time. I'll see you in 2 Tuesdays at 8 p.m. In the meantime, please email me with questions or comments or prayer requests. We'll be in touch. Y'all take care.